My name is Rachel, and I am 34 years old. Tonight, I am standing in a grand ballroom at a charity gala, wearing a navy blue evening gown that I purchased with money I earned through my own hard work. My 5-year-old son Lucas stands behind me, his small fingers wrapped tightly around my hand. He looks adorable in his tiny gray suit, his curious eyes scanning the elegant room filled with chandeliers and well-dressed strangers. Just a few steps away, I notice my ex-husband, Derek. The moment his eyes land on the little boy holding my hand, his face turns completely pale. 5 years ago, I believed my entire world had crumbled into dust when Derek abandoned me for my own sister. But standing here tonight, watching the shock spread across his face, I finally understand that his betrayal was never my ending. It was my beginning. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from today. If stories about resilience and second chances resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now let me take you back 5 years ago to a time when I still believed in fairy tale endings. At 29 years old, I thought I had built the perfect life. Derek and I had been married for 4 wonderful years, or at least that is what I believed them to be. We first crossed paths during our sophomore year at Northwestern University. I was pursuing my degree in interior design while Derek was deep into his business studies. He caught my attention during a campus event when he confidently walked up to me and introduced himself. He had this charm about him, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room worth talking to. After graduation, our lives fell into place like puzzle pieces. Derek secured a lucrative position at a prominent financial firm in downtown Chicago. His ambition was something I admired deeply. He would talk about climbing the corporate ladder, about providing for our future family, about building an empire together. Meanwhile, I launched my freelance interior design career, taking on projects for upscale apartments and condominiums across the city. My business was growing steadily, and I felt proud of what I was creating. We lived in a stunning apartment in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Every Sunday morning became our sacred ritual. Derek would crack eggs into a sizzling pan while I operated the coffee maker. We would carry our plates to the breakfast nook by our large windows and watch joggers pass by and dogs being walked through the tree-lined streets. Those mornings felt like proof that we had made it, that all our hard work was paying off. We talked constantly about starting a family. Derek wanted at least 2 children, maybe 3. I imagined decorating a nursery, picking out tiny clothes, watching Derek become a father. We even discussed buying a house with a proper backyard once we had saved enough. Every plan we made together reinforced my belief that this man was my forever. My younger sister Megan was 25 at that time, exactly 4 years my junior. Growing up, Megan had always occupied a different space in our family than I did. While I was the quiet achiever, the responsible one who never caused trouble, Megan was the firecracker. She demanded attention simply by existing. Her laughter was louder, her personality more magnetic, her presence impossible to ignore. Our parents gravitated toward her in ways they never did with me. I was dependable, so they depended on me. Megan was unpredictable, so they worried over her, fussed about her, and ultimately loved her with an intensity that sometimes left me feeling invisible. When Megan called me one rainy Tuesday evening, sobbing into the phone, I immediately dropped everything. She told me through her tears that her boyfriend of 3 years had ended their relationship. She said she had nowhere to go, that her lease was up, and she could not afford her own place yet. My heart broke for her. I brought up the idea with Derek that same night. He hesitated noticeably. He mentioned that we valued our privacy, that adding another person to our space might disrupt our routines. But I pleaded with him. I told him that family mattered, that Megan was struggling, that it would only be for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. Eventually, he agreed, though his reluctance should have been my first warning. Megan moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases and a grateful smile. The first week passed without incident. She was appreciative and helpful. She cooked dinner for us twice and even bought fresh flowers for the dining table as a thank you gesture. I felt good about my decision to help her. But during the second week, something shifted in the atmosphere of our home. Derek started arriving home from work later than usual. When I asked about it, he explained that a major project was demanding overtime. I accepted this explanation without question. Then I began noticing how frequently he checked his phone, how he would smile at certain messages and quickly angle the screen away from me. One particular evening stands out painfully in my memory. I came home earlier than expected and heard laughter drifting from the kitchen. When I walked in, I found Derek and Megan standing unusually close together, their conversation immediately dying the moment they noticed me. Megan recovered first, casually mentioning that they had been discussing some television series they both enjoyed. Derek nodded a little too quickly in agreement. I told myself I was reading too much into innocent interactions. This was my husband. This was my baby sister. They were simply becoming comfortable around each other, building a sibling-like rapport. I buried my unease deep down and chose to trust the two people I loved most in this world. That trust would soon prove to be the biggest mistake of my life. The day my world shattered was supposed to be one of celebration. It was our 4th wedding anniversary, a milestone that deserved something special. I had been planning the evening for weeks. I left my office early that afternoon, stopping first at a florist to pick up a beautiful arrangement of Derek's favorite flowers. Then I visited our favorite wine shop and purchased the bottle we had been saving for a meaningful occasion. But the most precious item I carried was hidden inside my purse, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. 2 days earlier, I had taken a pregnancy test. When those 2 pink lines appeared, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried tears of pure joy. I was going to be a mother. Derek was going to be a father. Our dreams of starting a family were finally coming true. I decided to reveal the news during our anniversary dinner, imagining his face lighting up with happiness, imagining us embracing and crying together. When I unlocked the door to our apartment, I heard sounds that did not belong. There was laughter, but not the innocent kind I had heard before. There were other noises, too, sounds that made my stomach clench with dread. My heart pounded against my ribs as I walked down the hallway. Each step felt heavy, as if my body already knew what my mind refused to accept. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with trembling fingers. The scene before me burned itself permanently into my memory. Derek and Megan were tangled together in our bed, the bed I slept in every night, the bed where Derek held me and told me he loved me, the bed where we talked about our future children. The bouquet of flowers slipped from my hands and scattered across the hardwood floor, petals separating from stems like pieces of my heart breaking apart. I could not speak. I could not scream. I could not even cry. I just stood there, frozen, as my entire understanding of reality collapsed. Derek scrambled in panic, his face draining of color, words tumbling from his mouth in frantic explanations that I could not process. But Megan reacted differently. She looked at me with an expression that held no shame, no remorse, only something that resembled defiance. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, as if my discovery was inevitable and even welcome. I turned and ran. Derek chased me through the apartment, calling my name repeatedly, but I did not stop. I grabbed my keys from the counter and fled out the door, leaving behind the flowers, the wine, and the positive pregnancy test that he would never learn about from me. 2 days later, I returned to collect my belongings. Derek was waiting for me in the living room. He said we needed to talk, that I deserved an explanation. His explanation only deepened my wounds. He confessed that his feelings for Megan had developed during her very first month living with us. He claimed it was not intentional, that the attraction simply grew without his control. Then he said the words that twisted the knife already buried in my chest. He told me that Megan made him feel alive again, that she admired him in ways I no longer did. He said I had become too absorbed in my work, too distant, too unavailable for his emotional needs. I stood there listening to him reconstruct our marriage as my failure, as if his infidelity was simply a natural consequence of my shortcomings. I made a decision in that moment. I would not tell him about the baby. He had chosen my sister over me. He had thrown away 4 years of marriage without a second thought. He did not deserve to know about the child growing inside me. He did not deserve any part of our future. After leaving the apartment, I drove directly to my parents' house in the suburbs. I needed comfort. I needed someone to hold me and tell me that everything would be okay, that this nightmare would eventually end. But comfort was not what I found. When I arrived, my mother greeted me with a strange expression. She had already spoken with Megan on the phone. As I poured out my heartbreak, expecting outrage and maternal protection, my mother's response devastated me more than anything Derek had said. She told me that Megan had provided her with context. She said Megan explained that I had been emotionally neglecting Derek for years. She said Megan told her I was cold, distant, and unavailable. According to my mother, Derek had been lonely in our marriage, and I was apparently to blame. My father sat silently in his armchair throughout this conversation, refusing to meet my eyes, refusing to defend me. Then my mother delivered the final blow. She said that Megan deserved happiness too. She reminded me that I had enjoyed 4 years with Derek. She suggested that perhaps it was simply Megan's turn now. In that moment, clarity struck me with painful force. I had always been the second-choice daughter in this family. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I achieved, no matter how perfectly I behaved, I would never matter as much as Megan. They would always find ways to excuse her actions. They would always prioritize her happiness over mine. I walked out of my childhood home that day with the understanding that my family was no longer a source of support. I was truly alone. The divorce papers arrived at my temporary address 3 weeks later. Derek's attorney was aggressive and calculated. They demanded that I reimburse half the value of the apartment, despite the fact that I had contributed equally to its purchase. Then came the cruelest revelation. Derek knew about my pregnancy. Megan had apparently searched through my purse on the day of the discovery and found the positive test. She told Derek everything. But Derek made his position absolutely clear through a text message. Those words still exist on my phone because I saved them as a reminder. He wrote that he wanted no involvement with the child. He wrote that I should never contact him about it. I read that message until the sentences blurred behind my tears. Then I signed every document his lawyers put in front of me. I surrendered all claims to the apartment, to our joint savings, to everything we had accumulated together. I wanted nothing that connected me to him. I wanted only my freedom and my child. Within the span of several weeks, I lost my husband, my sister, my parents' support, and my home. I found a small studio apartment on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood that was a far cry from Lincoln Park. My interior design business suffered because grief consumed my ability to concentrate. Several clients terminated their contracts when I missed deadlines. Money became increasingly tight. Every night in that cramped studio, I would lie alone on a mattress on the floor, my hand resting on my growing belly. I talked to the baby constantly, telling stories, making promises, apologizing for the circumstances into which they would be born. I swore to that unborn child that I would provide a better life, that I would rebuild everything, that their existence was the only reason I had not completely surrendered to despair. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an envelope that felt like a deliberate act of cruelty. Inside was a wedding invitation. Derek and Megan were getting married. The ceremony would take place at one of the most prestigious hotels in downtown Chicago, the same hotel where Derek and I had celebrated our first anniversary together. The invitation came with a handwritten note from my mother. Her words asked me to attend, to wish my sister well, to put aside my feelings for the sake of family unity. I was 7 months pregnant when I held that invitation in my hands. My belly was round and heavy with life. My ankles were swollen. My back ached constantly. And I was being asked to celebrate the union of my ex-husband and my sister. I did not attend the wedding. But in a moment of weakness, I looked at social media. The photographs flooded my screen before I could stop scrolling. Megan radiant in an elaborate white gown. Derek beaming beside her with a smile I once believed was reserved only for me. My parents standing proudly with the couple, their faces glowing with joy. I deleted all my social media accounts that night and sat in darkness for hours. 2 months later, I went into labor. There was no one to drive me to the hospital. I called a taxi and climbed into the back seat alone, breathing through contractions that grew increasingly intense. At the hospital, nurses and doctors surrounded me, but no family member stood by my side. No husband held my hand. No mother wiped sweat from my forehead. 14 hours of labor passed. 14 hours of pain, fear, and complete solitude. When they finally placed my son in my arms, I wept uncontrollably. He was so tiny, so perfect, so entirely mine. His eyes were closed, his fists clenched, his small chest rising and falling with each precious breath. I named him Lucas, which means light. In the overwhelming darkness that had consumed my life, he was the only light that remained. The first months of single motherhood tested every limit I possessed. I woke before dawn each day to work on design projects while Lucas still slept. I survived on minimal sleep, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. My savings dwindled rapidly as diapers and formula and rent consumed everything I earned. There were nights when despair threatened to swallow me completely. I would sit in the dark after Lucas fell asleep, calculating how little money remained, wondering how long I could sustain this impossible balancing act. One particular night, I nearly called my mother to beg for help, but then Lucas stirred in his crib. His tiny face turned toward me, and even in sleep he seemed to smile. That innocent expression reminded me that someone depended on me entirely. Someone needed me to keep fighting. I put down the phone and made a silent vow. I would find a way forward. I would build something from the ashes of my old life. No one else was coming to save me, so I would save myself. On Lucas's first birthday, I made a decision that would transform everything. Freelancing was no longer sustainable. The inconsistent income created constant anxiety. I needed to build something stable, something I could control, something that would provide lasting security for my son. I decided to start my own interior design company. I named it Second Dawn Design because I was creating a second chance for myself. In the beginning, it was just me working from my tiny apartment. Lucas would play in his playpen beside my desk while I sketched designs and took calls with potential clients. I specialized in designing spaces for young families, rooms that balanced beauty with child safety and practicality. It was a niche I understood intimately from my own experience as a new mother. My first significant client was a young couple expecting their first baby. They wanted me to design their entire nursery and living space. I poured my heart into that project, and they loved the results. They recommended me to 3 friends, who each recommended me to others. Word spread. Demand grew. Around this same time, I discovered a support group for single mothers in my neighborhood. Joining that group proved to be one of the best decisions I ever made. That was where I met Diana, a single mother of 2 daughters who had survived her own painful divorce. Diana understood my struggles without explanation. We became instant friends, helping each other navigate the challenges of solo parenting. Diana and I developed a system. We would trade babysitting duties, allowing each other time to work or simply rest. We shared meals and conversations and tears. She became the sister I had lost, except Diana's loyalty was genuine and unconditional. Work continued to bring unexpected blessings. On one of my larger projects, I collaborated with an architect named Marcus. From our first meeting, I noticed that Marcus was different from any man I had encountered before. He was patient in a way that Derek never had been. He listened when I spoke. He respected my opinions and expertise. He never pushed or demanded anything. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship, and friendship slowly blossomed into something deeper. I was hesitant at first. The wounds from my marriage had not fully healed, but Marcus never rushed me. He simply continued showing up, being kind, being consistent. When Marcus finally met Lucas, I watched nervously to see how they would interact. My worry was completely unnecessary. Marcus got down on his knees and let Lucas show him every toy in his collection. He listened with genuine interest as my toddler babbled explanations. He read bedtime stories in silly voices that made Lucas giggle endlessly. For the first time in years, I understood what it felt like to be loved properly. Real love was not possessive or controlling. Real love was patient and respectful. Real love saw your struggles and chose to stand beside you anyway. 3 years after founding Second Dawn Design, my company had grown beyond anything I initially imagined. A prominent local architecture magazine featured me in an interview about successful women entrepreneurs. I hired 5 employees and moved operations into a proper office space. My client list included some of the most respected developers in Chicago. Lucas was 4 years old, healthy and intelligent, and overflowing with affection. Marcus and I were officially together, and he had become a permanent presence in our lives. I had rebuilt everything from ruins. but there remained a small wound inside me that had never completely closed, a scar left by betrayal that still occasionally ached. 5 years after my divorce, I received an invitation that filled me with both excitement and apprehension. A prestigious architecture foundation had selected me to speak at their annual charity gala. They wanted me to share my story of building a successful business from nothing. It was an incredible honor, recognition of everything I had accomplished through determination and hard work. I decided to bring Lucas with me. At 5 years old, he was mature enough to experience such a special occasion. I found him an adorable gray suit that made him look like a tiny gentleman. Marcus would be there as well, supporting me from across the room as he always did. When I entered that ballroom holding Lucas's hand, I felt transformed. The broken woman who had cried alone in a tiny studio apartment no longer existed. In her place stood someone confident, successful, and at peace. Then my eyes swept across the room and landed on two familiar figures near the bar, Derek and Megan. Derek appeared markedly different from the man I had married. He was thinner, with shadows under his eyes that suggested sleepless nights and accumulated stress. Something in his posture communicated defeat. Megan remained beautiful as always, but there was a coldness in her expression that I did not remember from before. Her smile looked practiced rather than genuine. Derek's gaze found mine across the crowded room. I watched his eyes move from my face down to the small boy standing behind me. I witnessed the exact moment recognition struck him. I saw him mentally calculating years and ages and genetic resemblances. His face turned completely white. I delivered my speech to a captivated audience. I spoke about failure and resilience, about losing everything and finding the courage to rebuild. I received a standing ovation that lasted nearly a minute. Afterward, Derek approached me. He waited until Lucas was temporarily occupied with Marcus, selecting desserts from the buffet table. Derek's voice trembled when he spoke. He asked me directly whether Lucas was his son. I looked at my ex-husband with calm that surprised even myself. I told him that Lucas was my son. I told him that he had forfeited any claim to fatherhood 5 years earlier. I removed my phone from my clutch and showed him the text message he had sent me, the one I had preserved all this time. The message where he explicitly stated he wanted nothing to do with the child. Derek stared at his own words in silence. He had no defense. He had no excuse. I spoke clearly and without anger. I told him that he made his choice when he selected my sister instead of our marriage. I told him that he made his choice when he rejected his own child before that child even drew breath. I told him that choices carry consequences, and he was now confronting his. I turned and walked away without looking back. That evening, I learned from a mutual acquaintance what had transpired in Derek and Megan's marriage. They had spent years attempting to conceive without success. Megan was unable to have children. This reality had created immense strain between them. Derek blamed Megan. Megan blamed Derek. Their marriage had deteriorated into constant conflict. They were currently separated and proceeding toward divorce. I also learned that my parents had attempted to contact me multiple times during the past year. Apparently, they were beginning to recognize their mistakes, beginning to understand that they had misjudged both Megan and me. I had not returned their calls. I had constructed a new life, and not everyone from my past deserved entry into it. Some bridges burn for good reasons. Healing from betrayal was neither quick nor straightforward. It was a gradual process that required tremendous effort and patience. During the first years after my divorce, anger occupied permanent residence in my chest. I fantasized about confronting Derek and Megan, about making them experience even a fraction of the pain they had inflicted upon me. I imagined their lives falling apart while I watched with satisfaction. But slowly I recognized that harboring such anger was harming only myself. It was poison I swallowed daily while hoping they would suffer the effects. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand something crucial. Forgiveness was not about excusing what they had done. Forgiveness was about releasing myself from the burden of resentment. I did not need Derek to apologize. I did not need Megan to acknowledge her wrongs. I did not require my parents to admit their failures. My peace did not depend on their actions. My healing was my own responsibility and my own victory. Today, I am 34 years old. I own and operate a thriving company that I constructed from absolutely nothing. I am engaged to Marcus, a man who loves me completely and adores my son as if Lucas were his own flesh and blood. Lucas is 6 years old now, bright and curious and affectionate. He understands that Derek exists, but Marcus is the one he calls Dad. I have built a chosen family. Diana remains my dearest friend. The women from my single mother's support group have become like sisters. I have learned that family is not always determined by blood. Sometimes family is simply the people who stay when everything falls apart. When Derek saw Lucas at that gala, he finally comprehended what his choices had cost him. He lost a wife who would have remained faithful through any difficulty. He lost a son who would have adored him. He lost an entire life that could have been beautiful. But here is the truth I want to leave you with. I never needed Derek to understand what he lost. I never needed that moment of vindication. My happiness, my success, my inner peace, none of these were ever about proving anything to him or to anyone else. They were about proving something to myself. They were about discovering that I was stronger than I ever imagined. The greatest wisdom I gained through all this suffering is simple but profound. Pain does not have to define your story. Sometimes losing everything you believed you wanted is the only path to finding what you actually need. If you are experiencing something similar right now, please know this truth. The conclusion of one chapter does not mean the conclusion of your entire story. Sometimes the most meaningful chapters are precisely the ones you never anticipated writing. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you discover the strength to move forward and rebuild? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with your heart, please give it a like to help others find this message. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories about resilience and hope. And if you know someone who needs encouragement today, please share this video with them. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. I wish you courage in your struggles, healing for your wounds, and the beautiful second chapter that you deserve.